Evet, çok değerli katılımcılar.
Distinguished participants, distinguished colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you all, and I would like to express my deep regards on behalf of my ministry and my general directorate. My name is Ramazan Usta. I am from the General Directorate of Renewable Energy. I am the Deputy General Director. We have 1.5 hours in this session, and we will discuss the subject together. We have valuable panelists in this session, and the subject is how to improve and how to develop wind industry in Turkey. Each speaker has 15 minutes, and the last 15 minutes will be dedicated for questions. And actually, this is the plan for this session. You see the panelists. The first one is Giles Dixon from EVA. He is the CEO of the EVA. Welcome, Mr. Dixon. Dr. Murat Onuk from Eurosolar Turkey, board member, and also he's working as an independent consultant. He will share his experiences in the field of finance, investment, and investors. The next one is Ibrahim Özarslan, General Manager of Nordex Company. And also he will talk about the options and alternatives for Turkey within the framework of a producer, within a perspective of a manufacturer. What are the needs, what are the requirements, the situation in the market, their market strategy, their plan for Turkey. And finally, we have Mehmet Acarla from Borusan EMBW, again General Manager. He is also explaining his experiences to us from the sector, of course. He will also talk about legislation and incentive mechanisms. Yes. Before I give the floor to the panelists, I would like to underline some important aspects about renewable energy. In Turkey, the electricity generation per capita is 3,000. This is lower than the European Union average. This is 6,000 in the European Union. This is the per capita consumption. And according to the estimations in the year 2023, it will reach up to 5,000. When we compare Turkey with 12 years ago, we are consuming twofold more energy. And according to the estimations for the year 2023, we will double this amount. And in the decade, the forthcoming decade, there is an increasing need of energy, of course, and we need an investment of 12 billion per year, and it means 120 billion in 10 years. Those investments will continue definitely, but when we look at the world, there is a population of 7 billion people, and 1.3 billion of them actually do not have any access to electricity. Starting from the invention of the electricity bulb, this has been 100 years ago, still some people suffer from this problem. They don't have access to electricity. In the renewable energy industry, 6 million people are employed, and 753,000 of those are employed in the field of wind energy. As you all know, in Turkey, we have significant potentials for wind, 10,000 megawatt from the sea and 38,000 onshore, offshore and onshore totally. We have almost 48,000 megawatts of potential. As of November, the installed capacity in Turkey is 72 gigawatts. Almost 5 gigawatts is coming from wind. The investments on wind energy were started in 1990s, end of 1990s. It was 20 megawatts in the year 2000. Today, it was increased, and now we are talking about around 5 gigawatts. Still, we also have projects under construction of 2,000 megawatts. Again, as you know, in the year 2007, we received license applications, and we had applications for 72,000, and 7,001 were licensed already. In April 2015, 3,000 megawatts, for 3,000 megawatt capacity, we received 42,000 applications. 1,100 folds more. I mean, the number of applications is really very high, and the evaluation process is going on. The electricity generation is 250 terawatts, and 70% of it, 50 terawatts, from renewables, and 16% is from wind. This is 8 terawatt per hour. In 2023, we will be a more sustainable country with more renewable energy resources, and we wish to meet the needs from local sources, and for this respect we have objectives. And for the wind, as you know, 20,000 megawatts is the objective. And similarly, to reach this objective, we have the renewable energy support mechanism. This mechanism is applicable now until the end of 2020. The plants, they will actually sell their electricity for 10 years to the government. I mean, the government will purchase their energy for 10 years. And also, the mechanic and electromechanic components are planned to be produced in Turkey. And if the components are produced in Turkey, there will be an incentive, a support for 5 years. Again, if the facility will be commissioned until the end of 2020, those facilities are included in those mechanisms. You know, there is the feed-in tariff, and together with the local component incentive, then we are talking about huge support. And if it is 100% local and domestic, then 11 is actually the guarantee given by the government. This incentive was started to be implemented in 2014. And now we evaluated the applications in 2016. Last week, we all evaluated those applications. They are finalized. 14 wind and 2 HPP, a total of 16 applications were accepted in 2014. And 28.2 million US dollars of support payment was made to those facilities. In the year 2035, 15, I'm sorry, 32 wind and 3 HPP power plant applications were evaluated, they were accepted, and 35.5 million USD was paid. Again, as you know, wind energy and local support application, they are for the blades, tower, and connection components only. And especially among those components, the ones, of course, within the framework of the legislation, we believe they can be produced in Turkey locally. And we are supporting those activities. So as to have a facility 100% domestic, actually we are working very hard. We have cooperation and coordination with producers, with manufacturers. We are explaining this support mechanism, and also within the framework of localization strategy, we are inviting actually those companies to Turkey. And also particularly about generators and power, those components should also be manufactured in Turkey. This is our plan, especially the ones like rotor and nacelle groups. The entire mechanical components I'm talking about, when they are started to be produced in Turkey, we will be talking about 100% domestic facilities. If we have 100% domestic production or a generation, then the raw materials or the semi-products or the other supplies and materials will be local, will be localized. And in this respect, again, we underline the importance of the industrialization in this field. The localization will be faster and it will be permanent. Of course, while taking such a decision, in terms of economic, technical, and political surveys are necessary. As a result of those surveys, we look at the operator and the location, the site, marketing, employment, and R&D. Altogether, they need to come here actually. So how they are going to take place, everything needs to be decided. And also, we are supporting actually the production in Turkey, and also local, Turkish companies should also be supported. We wish for this as well. Shortly, this is an introduction. And then I would like to turn to the panelists. There is no actually a particular order, but maybe we can start with our foreign guest. I'm sorry, maybe we can keep you at the very end, Mr. Dixon. Then I will start with the producer company, Nordex company. Ibrahim, the floor is yours. Thank you, Ramazan. Thank you very much, and I would like to express my deep regards. Ibrahim Özaslan, Nordex General Manager. Of course, Ramazan gave us actually background information. It was a very nice summary. And particularly the sector, the industry, and how can we develop the sector in Turkey. Let us talk about this subject. What are the recommendations maybe? What are the alternatives? Actually, this is the aim of this session. First of all, I would like to say something. In Turkey, right now, the wind sector is transforming into an industry from a market. Right now, when we look at Turkish wind industry, we see some structures, but we are not talking about a large-scale industry. There is a big market, but the actually activities by our company or other companies, the market is now turning into an industry. How can we improve the industry further? There are maybe four recommendations. The first one is the annual wind energy or wind volume in the year 2014, 804 megawatts installed capacity. They were commissioned. And when we look at Turkey's capacity, we are talking about 48,000 megawatts of capacity, and according to the objectives of 2023, we have an objective of 20,000 megawatts. Then it means that we need to increase the activities because the capacity is more. So what we expect that the volume should be increased more, and then 1.5 or 2 megawatts of installed capacity, then this market has its own dynamics, and I believe it will become attractive. 800 megawatt, is it actually a very little number? No, I'm not saying this, but if we would like to accelerate our activities, if we would like to have a faster development, then we should increase this number. This is really important. And of course, there are some obstacles in front of us. Many things can be said, but mainly I would like to underline the problems coming from the legislation. I'm talking about the license process. It is slow. It's a slow process, and or when the license is received during the erection phase or after, so as not to have problems, we actually would be very careful. When you look at the other countries, you know there are some risk factors, and when we look at Turkish market, you see more risk factors, and because of those risks, we cannot increase this installed capacity. And also, the grid capacity is not sufficient in some regions, and also the wind parks cannot be implemented because of this lack of sufficient grid. But for the growth of the sector and for the development improvement of the industry, those numbers should be increased definitely. Every year we are talking about 100 or 150 megawatts more. Every year we increase it, but in comparison with the potential, these numbers must be increased. This is the first factor. Secondly, Ramazan also explained it, local or domestic production and the production or manufacturing of the components in Turkey. It is very helpful for the industry. We are talking about 4,200 installed capacity in Turkey. Blade, tower, and connection components are being manufactured. But we are only manufacturing. The design, the development, R&D are from abroad, not in Turkey. So in this respect, the producers, as I'm representing of Nordex, we have some responsibilities, we know it. Just to actually produce more components in Turkey, to make more production in Turkey, and then there will be also the suppliers and also technology transfer for Turkey. This will be really very good. And also on the third one, the turbines, the wind parks, the localization ratio should be increased. As Nordex company, blade or tower or connection components, 50% of the turbines are produced in Turkey. We have objectives to increase it. What other parts, what other components can be produced in Turkey? We are discussing on those matters. Nacelle or totally turbine produced 100% in Turkey. It's possible, and of course the volume must be increased first. Then we should have more installed capacity annually in Turkey. Then we can have it. As the foreign producers, you look at the installed capacity of that country and you look at your opportunities, and then you make your calculations and estimations, and then you develop your business case accordingly. When we look at the local components, as Ramazan also said, especially the steel components, the metal components, they can be easily produced in Turkey, and also in line with the producers, in line with the sub-industry, materials, etc. Everything is here. And the majority of the turbine can be produced in Turkey. Secondly, generator. Generator can be also produced in Turkey. The generator and the gear case or the transmission can also be produced in Turkey, but it will take some time, maybe 3 years, 4 years, but it is still possible. So we should start somewhere, and of course we should plan it first. Third one, about the local components. If we only focus on production, then okay, we have an industry instead of a market, but technology transfer and R&D should also brought to this country, and after that it can be possible to design the components in Turkey as well. Don't think it within the limits of Turkey. Just think about the other countries to be suppliers for other countries. We wish Turkey be, for instance, a supplier country for other countries. So we would like to have this in the future. And for this reason, technology transfer and R&D, but local R&D, are also very important for the development of the sector. And also about the generation, production, R&D, etc. They should be all done in here. Everybody should support. And I have another alternative. When we are talking about a park, you need actually the teams of erection, commissioning, maintenance, and etc. Some services. We should be careful. And we have taken some very good steps. 2 years ago, there is actually a company and from Germany, and gearbox is taken to Turkey from that company. In the meantime, I mean, in 2 years' time, we developed this subject, and etc. And also for maintenance purposes and repair and inspections for the blade, for instance, and inspections for the gear case, we have achieved a good development, especially the companies, the international companies coming to Turkey and establishing actually companies in here, having, for instance, partnerships in here. I believe the service sector should also be improved and developed further. This is very important. We should be careful about something. We need to get into the details deeper and deeper, because quality is very important, and especially we should be working with consciousness, and this is the utmost important thing, because the companies providing services are important in terms of safety, in terms of security, in terms of information transfer. They need to take a path in front of themselves. We are supporting those companies, and they are also really working very hard in this respect. And also the services to be rendered in Turkey. It is very important, and again, we cannot limit ourselves with Turkey, because we can provide, I mean, the Turkish companies, service companies can provide services abroad. Why not, actually? And within the framework or within cooperation with the producers, they can also have international ties. The fourth one is about finance. As Ramazan also said, industry and the sector actually is developing every year, and the international financing models are no more attractive, because the product is imported within those models, and then finance is also coming from abroad. But if you see local part is more, then we have limits in terms of international financing. Development of the Turkish sector is good, very good, but when we look at the, again, financing models, how we can finance them, this is the question. What type of a model we can use? This is important. As Nordex, we are now producing 50% of the turbine in Turkey, and we are using the model over German banks. From Germany, we have the finance. But it doesn't matter, German banks or others, only 50% of the part coming from abroad, they are financing it. And the domestic part, if it is more, then of course the international part is low and less, then we have less chance to finance it internationally. So we need a model actually for Turkey. We should actually develop new models, because hereby we are talking about components and production of the components in here, then of course the financing should be developed. It doesn't matter local or international or leasing or any way, we should develop actually those type of financial models. The sector should be supported this way, because when we look at the sector, when we look at actually the companies, they need to have access to financial resources. That's all I can say. I don't know, maybe you have questions, or I don't know. I think we can take the questions at the very end. Ibrahim, thank you. We will get the questions at the last 15 minutes. Our time is up, really, and thank you very much for your prompt presentation. Okay. Ibrahim also underlined that turbines can be 100% locally produced. and also this is important for maintenance, repair, training, services, personnel, financing. He underlined R&D. The production should be supported with all its dimensions. And this way it can be possible to further improve the industry in Turkey. Thank you. Now I would like to continue with our next panelist from Eurosolar Turkey. I would like to give the floor to Murat Onuk. I would like to express my deep regards, and also I would like to thank for this organization. I would like to thank to Turkish Wind Energy Association. Their contribution is really very big, and especially I had the chance to work in this field in the very beginning, and then I worked as the general director of one of the most important companies in Turkey, and then I worked as an investor, and now I'm working as a consultant. Right at that moment, I'm representing an NGO here. We are actually a union of producers. So we are. I am hereby representing the civil society among you. The electricity supply is inevitable for all countries. While we meet the energy needs, electricity energy needs, there is a criterion to take into consideration. Most of the time, we decide for investment with short term, but the social costs, starting very, very beginning to the end, we should also take those costs into consideration while we are deciding for investments. And we need to have an approach, problem or solution. And especially we see that financial resources are scarce, and we have huge energy need in Turkey. We are dependent to importation in Turkey, but also we have some sources that we do not utilize as much as possible. When we consider coal as an alternative in terms of lifelong cost, the investment cost of coal should include health damage, environmental damage, cancer hospitals, and etc. They should be all considered, because when their life is over, also we should consider all the other aspects. If we think nuclear energy is an alternative, the technology was developed many years ago, starting with the atomic bomb, but the lifelong costs and possible risks in case of any accident, for instance, all the costs should be considered. The wastes, for instance, the fuel, they have radioactivity. We should consider them all. And then when we look at the picture, look at the general picture, the solution is in the renewable energy. But before that, of course, the efficient use of energy is important. Because in Turkey, when we look at the use of energy, we are actually wasting energy. We need to be careful on this respect and to do what necessary. And when we talk about renewable energy, wind brings good opportunities for us. Turkey had investments for HPP, although the large ones are not considered as renewable, but for the hydro power plants, actually the source is in the eastern part, but the consumption is in the western part. So there's a need for transfer. But in the wind, there is no such a problem because they are in the same place. So wind is advantageous for Turkey. But unfortunately, we are not utilizing wind energy sufficiently. Again, this is valid for solar energy. We have solar potential, but we are very far behind. And within the framework of a producer, as Ibrahim explained, actually, most important problem is how to improve production. This was the case in the year 2007. And they said that, okay, the market was this, and did you think that you could sell 100 towers in Turkey? They asked me. Now, there was no such a problem. Today, we have a couple of companies producing towers, a couple of companies producing blades. Now we are talking about producing turbine, but the market size is still needs to be developed. Just for 1,500 megawatts or 2,000 megawatts annual, I'm talking about the market size, it needs to be improved this way. And if it is the case, then the problems will be over and it will bring employment opportunities. And with the employment, of course, I'm talking about technical staff, technical personnel, and then we will have actual solutions for it. Without having the sufficient size of a market, we have difficulties in development and improvement. And especially another problematic area is the licensing process. For instance, if the investment is in more than one province, you should repeat the licensing procedure in every province. The authorities are different, agencies are different, and they don't know within each other what is the procedure. They don't know, and then the costs are different, for instance, in one province and in other. And also, again, we sometimes see that they need to take almost 90 different permits just to have a license. This is a barrier. This is an obstacle in front of the investor. We should overcome those type of things because we saw it in the past. The actually investors fought a lot. And when we look at the situation from the perspective of a civil society, especially the civil society is just an audience. Just watching, actually. But when you look at Germany, both in solar and wind, the civil society participation was strong in Germany. Local communities, for instance, in Germany, the farmers' cooperatives, for instance, they even are capable of making their own investments for their own use. Again, in Turkey, maybe we can see some examples in solar, but still we need to have local community included in this picture. Because right now we are talking about a very limited participation. We should develop some methods to facilitate it. For instance, community-supported farm projects, I don't know, community-supported energy projects. Those type of projects can help the local people to produce, to generate their own energy for their own consumption. I don't know if those type of projects can be possible, but unfortunately, when you look at the licensing procedure, it is impossible for those people to do it right now. And also finance, they don't have money, so actually those type of things should be considered to support the sector. That's all I can say. Thank you. Thank you, Murat. You finished in the due time, so that is very good. Murat also underlined the difficult licensing process and some challenges coming from the legislation. And he also underlined the importance of the civil society and community-based projects are necessary according to him. And we should also teach people how to use energy efficiently. Again, this is also underlined by Murat Onuk. Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor to Mehmet Acar'la. We listen to the producer first, then we listen to a consultant. Now it's time to listen to an investor, and he will talk about actually the subject from the investment perspective. How can we be more industrialized? From Borusan, ENBW, Mehmet, the floor is yours. Thank you, Ramazan. Borusan and ENBW is actually partnership of Germany and Turkey. So actually, this is important in terms of having a perspective on over the market. And we are active only in renewable energy field. All those investments are here in wind. All the strategies plans are for renewables. The subject today in this panel is very important for our company as well. How can we improve the industry in Turkey? We have a perspective of an investor, definitely, but as a principle, energy in all the countries is strategic. And energy is a strategic tool for every country. Wind, gas, coal, don't think about it. The supply security, secure distribution, transmission, those are indicators of a competitiveness of a company, or those type of things put a country in a disadvantaged position. So energy is very important for countries. If you take the correct decisions in your country, then you will be more successful. When we look at Turkey, we have some strategies. Of course, the Ministry of Energy have strategy documents and etc. And also there are plans for renewable energy and also plans for other energy resources. They are really very important because those strategies just guide us, show us a way towards future. Of course, in the morning, we discussed this subject, whether it is realistic or not, but still what is important first is to have those strategies, because it is important for the investor just to evaluate the market, when to invest, how much invest, what is the cost. Just to foresee those type of things, it's very important, and Turkey already took significant steps. Maybe I can have a parenthesis and maybe we can review and you review the document submitted to the summit in Paris, because in the position paper of Turkey submitted to Paris summit, the figure is different. So it should be clear. I mean, the strategy must be clear. Yes, okay. We have the strategy in Turkey. What is next? First of all, we have the legislation. I agree there were many modifications and amendments to the legislation and mistakes were made in the beginning, but in terms of the public, in terms of the investors, it was a learning process. It was a learning curve, let me say. And the investments just started. Mainly we can talk about after 2000, 2001. And everybody learned this market all together. And then we have requests, demands, and according to the solutions to those problems, always actually the public sector should be hand in hand with the private sector. There has to be, information exchange. And they did it in Turkey. I mean, we did it in Turkey, but it's not sufficient enough. Today, we know it, as Murat also said, the legislation is still problematic. There are many permits to be taken during the licensing process. It's not actually the number of the permits itself, I think. Maybe it's wrong just to say that, okay, let the investors start immediately, don't take anything into consideration. I'm not saying this. Here, I'm saying that there's a need for unity and coordination. And the ministries, different legislation should be in harmony. And also, again, the coordination board, written in the strategy paper, should be established immediately. And, the ministries have different approaches to the investments, and this board can solve those problems. As an investor, I can also say that I'm not saying that all the permits are automatically be given by the government. I'm not saying this. We are only saying that when we go to the city A, we need to follow the rules and principles, but we would like to know those rules and principles before. And we would like to have standard rules and principles in city A, in city B, C, D, etc. There has to be a standardization. That is what we want. And I believe the steps to be taken soon. And those mechanisms will be simplified. I don't believe that actually this is going to be shortened, but I think it is going to be understandable and clear. Because it's important for investors, especially for the foreign investors. Foreseeability is important. We need to know before what is going to happen. The investors want to know the risks before, because the investors want to take necessary measures against those risks beforehand. Because when we see always and all the time a different procedure, then it's problematic. We are talking about a market, but this market is transformed into an industry. We are always talking about this. We would like to reach to a spot that the cost of those projects, the turbines and etc., be localized. This is our ultimate goal. There's a precondition for this, as all the other speakers stated. First of all, there's a need for a market.
Yapmak istediği zaman ilk önce
A foreign investor, first of all, looks at the domestic market first. They try to estimate, how much I can produce, how much I can sell. They look at this. Then they look at further other markets for export. And also don't forget, renewable energy, mainly wind. Turkey is not alone in this demand. Every country have the same demand. And Iran may be actually a big market later. Or the North Africa can be, but still they face with this demand just to localization. The main criteria is the domestic market and its size. So how can we make it grow? We want to have, for instance, 20,000 megawatt of installed capacity for our future. We have objectives, but of course the activities will not stop when 2023. How can we improve it further? Especially Turkey actually suffered a lot in the beginning of this industry, beginning of this wind energy in Turkey. There were applications and then actually assessment tenders, etc. The beginning was very problematic. And from a perspective of an investor, we can talk about actually 5,500 megawatts of a capacity. This journey started in the year 2006, and we were talking about 5,500 megawatts. This is a realistic actually estimation. But we learned a lot in this beginning process. Both public and private sector learned a lot. And we made differences in the legislation. And also there are some changes, and then especially we have a better tendering system in the new law, but still there may be some gaps. Hereby we are talking about 5,000 megawatts. This is going to be tendered out. How much of it will be commissioned? We know about the tenders of solar energy. We know the numbers at the end. They made very simple calculations, and especially we were talking about different figures. If it would be the case, be sure the real investors I mean, the ones actually who worked very hard in this subject, we cannot pay for those figures because we know the reality of the market. They are not realistic, but there are many different investors. Even we can see very high numbers, but I'm sure we will look at back and try to find the mistake. I recommend not to do those mistakes. I recommend not to repeat mistakes. And in this respect, both the public sector and the private sector, we should be in good communication. How can we improve actually our investments to reach the objectives? We should talk seriously. This market cannot be created. This is my concern. There is no magical solution for this problem. Every country has its own peculiarities, so we need to find solutions for our problems. While the market is being developed, there are also infrastructure problems. There are transmission lines, and the transmission lines must be also healthy. And especially wind, solar, I'm talking about renewables, they have pulses especially. Then the infrastructure must be correct. There are still investments going on, but in the future we can have actually some problems. In the western part, there is huge wind potential. There are actually huge investments going on for transmission grid, but still there are weak points in this respect. So we should also emphasize those investments. Other subject is planning. We will make actually regional tenders, but there is something else. Each project must be financed. We are talking about large projects. No company can finance it on their equities. Some equities and some from financial resources. And while we are doing the financing, we as the company prefer the export credits. And there are some conditions put forward. And there are also very good project financing examples. But this is for our own company, just to bring no additional burden. And what does it mean? This will not bring any burden to Turkey as well. So this is valuable. I mean, to have and develop those type of financial models. But of course, the international financial institution asks that, do you have a basin plan? Okay, you have an environmental impact assessment, but then what about the situation in that basin? What about the environment over there? There may be other power plants proposed in the same region. What would be the effect on the basin as a whole? This is asked by the financial institution. So in this respect, I would like to take your attention to this subject, because in the future, while we are doing those tenders, we should think based on the basins. In the HPPs, we were late to have the basin planning, basin management planning, but still we have a chance in wind. We should think the basin. We shouldn't only focus on the capacity of the transmission. Think about all the environmental factors. Because when we ask for financial resources, even in wind, even in renewable energy, wind, which is environmental friendly, sometimes we see some abuses, or sometimes we see the investors can be reckless. I don't know, but we can see a reaction. This can be limited to the region, but tomorrow this will become an endemic. So let's do the plan together. Let's come together, public sector, private sector. and just include everything, and social and environmental impacts should be included, and then make the projects be financeable. So finally, it is the incentive mechanism. It's a critical subject. Ramazan gave some figures. This year, we are talking about 35 million USDs. Next year, we will go to 2.5 folds more. You should think about something here. Energy investments are long-term investments. We are talking about, for instance, 49 years and etc. We are thinking about the overall life of the facility, and we make the feasibility accordingly. And until the year 2014, the incentive mechanism is just in the form of a guarantor for the finance, and this is just the baseline. And the banks just look at this, and that's it. While they are providing finance, they only look at this. But now, they look at the local contribution and etc. But in terms of the producer, the incentive, it was the first time in 2015. And for the first time, this would be one of the most important parameters. And renewable energy users, the projects will use this incentive. And especially just to improve it, how we can improve it, first of all, don't repeat the mistake Spain did. Don't make retrospective correction, because then actually it's not possible to pay the debts. This is clear. Otherwise, those projects can no longer survive. No way. And while we are talking about project financing, at least 10 years of financing we are talking about. For 10 years, those facilities will work for the banks. After those 10-year period time, they will actually start to earn money. And even it can be 12 or 14 years in some regions and for some projects. Don't forget this. And actually, I don't want investments stuck in this respect. First of all, we have strategies, and then we act according to the strategies. If you have 20,000 megawatts of an objective in front of us, we should act accordingly. Or if you want to have energy generation with our own resources, then we should act accordingly. All the plans, strategies, everything, even the mechanisms, incentives, they need to be in harmony. Local incentive, local support is very important, localization is very important, but market should be created first. Otherwise, you cannot attract the investors. Secondly, okay, we are talking about local incentive. It's the indirect mechanism, don't forget. We are talking about incentives for renewable, but think about the natural gas. There are actually the cross subsidies, don't forget the cost for Turkey. It was described in the morning session, some incentives to coal. It was the case in the past, so don't forget. Based on very low prices, don't take urgent decisions. Don't take decisions in a rush. Otherwise, we cannot reach our goals. Thank you. Mehmet, thank you. Actually, he a bit delayed, but he talked about the management of the process. Related to the process, maybe there could be actually a new concept. I don't know, for wind or others, just like the licenses, permits, etc. He also underlined the river basins and importance of the river basins. We would like to have it for the investments. It can be possible, and we can study on them. From time to time, as the ministry, we are thinking about these matters as well. Related to legislation, he also underlined that the process should be well managed. Energy Commission committee actually worked very well. Halil is also with us. He is the head of the commission or the committee. And just for the improvement of the legislation, the committee actually is working very hard. So we are thankful for him and the committee. They worked even at the weekends, late hours, and etc. So sometimes we spend many nights working, but unfortunately the results actually cannot be taken. They were left unenforced. I hope all those matters will be brought before the parliament again. Otherwise, we may still have some problems. I hope the legislative works will continue. In terms of the renewable energy resources, in solar energy we took a step. In Konya Karapınar, energy specialization region was established in Konya. It covers an area of 1,800 megawatts. This was announced at the renewable energy area. And now it's possible to continue with the other activities like infrastructure and etc. Between the Ministry of Industry and other activities, they are still going on. Especially this will be ready for the investors. I mean, the situation will be ready for the investors if we take the necessary precautions. This is being done in solar, so why we do not do it in wind? Okay, now I will pass to the floor to the last panelist. Especially, we listened to all the actors, producer, investor, actually finance. But what about the situation? What is the situation in Turkey with a European perspective? I think Mr. Dixon will give us an insight about the European approach towards Turkey and Turkish industry.
Murat, Ibrahim and Mehmet have given us about what is happening in the Turkish market. And I would like to share some of my own perspectives with you from the European position that I represent. And what I'm going to share with you is really lessons learned from the European Union experience with wind, lessons learned that I think will be relevant to the problems, the issues that the three of you have raised. My first lesson learned is the importance of long-term policy stability and certainty. Now, you've all talked about this. We talked about it this morning as well. Investors watch very carefully what governments all over the world are doing in terms of the policy, the regulatory framework, the market design for wind. And they will choose to invest in those countries where they see the greatest policy, predictability, and certainty. They are interested in return on their investment. They're interested in stable policy regimes that will support stable revenues for them. It flows from this that targets are very important indeed. Now, Mehmet, you have put your finger on a very real live issue, which is that officially the government of Turkey has a target of 20 gigawatts of wind for 2023, and yet in its contribution to the Paris Climate Change Summit for December, the government has said 16 gigawatts for 2030. This is creating some confusion in the minds of investors, banks, institutional investors in Europe and in North America. They are asking questions about what is the real commitment of the government of Turkey to wind. They look at other countries, India, for example, that has a very clear and single target. It is 75 gigawatts by 2022, up from 22 gigawatts today. And they're thinking, well, that's clear. It's less clear in Turkey. Ramazan, you will have a new minister in 15 days' time. If you have the opportunity to put a very clear recommendation to him in his first week in office, I think I would certainly suggest, and I suspect the other panelists would agree, and many of the audience, that you strongly recommend that he or she clarifies what is Turkey's target long-term for wind. Grid investments. You've all mentioned this. In Europe, as I said this morning, wind is now 10% of the electricity consumed. Wind is 130 gigawatts of installed capacity now, 120 onshore, 10 offshore. In Europe, we have found that when you get to that kind of level, wind being 10% of the power supply, you need to start making very big investments in the transmission and, to a lesser extent, in the distribution grid infrastructure. New HVDC lines, for example, taking wind from the north of Germany to the south of Germany, where you have the industrial demand for electricity. Improving the transmission connections between different countries in Europe, so that Spain, for example, with its 23 gigawatts of wind and an economy that hasn't been performing until recently very well, can export its excess wind capacity to France and to other countries. What the European Union did was to get all of the transmission system operators together. There are 41 transmission companies in Europe, and the EU said to them, you tell us, please, what you think are the transmission grid infrastructure investment needs, and we will tell the 28 national governments in Europe that they have to support those investments, and we will put some EU money into those projects as well. And so the 41 transmission companies produce every year something called the 10-year network development plan. And it's simply a list of projects, priority projects, and if you're on that list, then you will get European Union funding. And that's a good thing, because that gives clarity to those wanting to invest in wind that the necessary investments to improve the grid infrastructure will happen as well. At the same time, when variable renewables, wind and solar, get to around 10 or 15% of the electricity supply, we have found in Europe that we've had to start redesigning the electricity market. The way that electricity is bought and sold in the wholesale market in Europe today is basically a system that has evolved over the last 30 to 40 years, and it's a system that assumes most electricity is produced from baseload power plants that are running all of the time, and from power plants that have an obligation to run all of the time. Of course, with wind and solar, it's very different. These are variable sources of supply, and the design of the electricity market has to be modified accordingly. So when it's all baseload, you can have day-ahead trading. When you've got variable supply, it makes more sense to have intraday trading with some very short closure times, even 30 minutes or even 15 minutes. That is the direction that the EU is now moving in. When you have that sort of electricity market, it is easier to integrate the variable renewables. But there are other things that have to happen at the same time. The demand has to be made more flexible. So the EU is now investing a lot in demand response, so that consumers can see different price signals depending on how much wind or how much sun is coming into the electricity market, and they can choose to consume or not to consume according to the greater variation in prices in the wholesale market. Okay? So that is the direction that the EU is now going in with the redesign of its electricity market. And when you get to 10 to 15% variable renewables in the system, what we're seeing in Europe is that that's really what you have to do. Now, there's one other key policy in Europe which has been important. It's something that does not exist here in Turkey. It's something that other countries such as China are now introducing, and that is a price on CO2. Now, Murat, I think you talked about the need for a level playing field so that the other costs linked to coal can be factored into the real costs of coal, so that you can put a price on the externalities linked to coal. In Europe, this is what the CO2 price system was all about. It was trying to disincentivize investments in coal and incentivize investments in renewables. For a time, it was working quite well, and then the economic crisis hit the EU in 2008, 2009, and the trading system for CO2 certificates collapsed. The price fell from 30 euros to 3 euros in a very short time. It's now recovered to 8 euros, but 8 euros is nowhere near enough to provide a price signal to invest in renewables. And actually what we found in the wind sector in Europe is that a CO2 price is useful in terms of giving a broad signal about the long-term direction of travel, what sort of investments in the power system you want to incentivize. Is it renewables or is it coal? But actually, for the purposes of financing a project today, you go to a bank with your net present value calculations on the Excel spreadsheet, and what the bank is interested in is the immediate revenue from the power purchasing agreement rather than the avoided cost, which is the CO2 price. So it's useful as a long-term signal, but it's really the tariff, the other financing mechanism that is more important in the short term to make investments happen. Some of you have talked about permitting and public acceptance. These are becoming important issues in Europe. Our experience has been that those operators that manage local public opinion carefully are those that have the greatest success in terms of getting the local population on board, and that means early engagement with local communities. And of course, it's very helpful when you can illustrate local economic benefits. And I think the point you've all been making about creating the local industrial base in Turkey is part of that. My final observation concerns the politics around wind. When wind started growing in Europe, when in the European Union we were at 4 or 5% of the electricity system, going back now probably 8 or 9, 7 or 8 years perhaps, the politics around wind were quite easy. It was seen as something that was on the edge of the electricity market. Yes, it needed some subsidies to get it going, but those subsidies wouldn't cost the whole economy that much money because it was quite small. Now that wind is 10%, people are beginning to say, hold on, how much are these subsidies really costing us? In Germany alone, the annual cost of the feed-in tariff for wind and solar is 23 billion euros a year now. And consumers, especially industrial consumers in Germany, are beginning to ask questions about the sustainability of the feed-in tariff system. Germany is actually moving to an auction-based system now, but still the politics have got a little bit more difficult around variable renewables that need a feed-in tariff still, whether in Germany or in other countries of the European Union. And I think it's fair to say that the wind industry perhaps in Europe didn't see this coming. Okay? I think my advice to you would be recognize that this may come, that industrial consumers, maybe they're already asking questions, but, you know, the feed-in tariff is there. It's slightly above the level of the wholesale price, so it is an added net cost, but you need to have the arguments ready for why that cost is justified. And of course, you're perhaps in a slightly better position than the European Union because you will be benefiting when you get to 10% from the fact that the costs of wind are much lower here in Turkey, will be much lower here in Turkey than they have been in Europe when we have hit 10%. And maybe wind will be completely at grid parity when you get to 10%. But please do think how you will tackle the political challenges that may come when people start asking questions about the costs of wind. One piece of advice to you would be to make common cause with the energy-intensive industries that are producing the components of wind turbines, cement and steel. In Europe, those have been two of the industries that have complained most about the cost of the feed-in tariffs in Europe, because they have to pay, because they are big consumers of electricity. But actually, if you can get them on your side as producers of the components of wind turbines, then that might be helpful. I think those would be my observations at this stage. Perhaps the single most important one that I've made is the point about long-term policy clarity. As I said this morning, we're now seeing in Europe big differences between individual countries within Europe in terms of their ability to attract investment, depending on the long-term nature of their policy support. So Spain is getting nothing now because they've made retrospective cuts. It's not just that the existing projects have lost money, Mehmet, it's that the signal to the investors has been, well, you might invest in this country in wind or in other forms of energy, but actually we're going to change the rules of the game during the course of your investment. So investors are now very reluctant to invest in wind or any form of energy or even other sectors in Spain. So the clarity and the certainty that you give to investors is absolutely key. Thank you.
Evet, biz
Thank you very much, Mr. Dixon, for your recommendations. We should pay attention also to the grid, and we have a clear actually strategy and plan, and the net message to the investors. Electricity market should be also revised, and accordingly, there is the variety in the wind and solar, so the system is different, and also the consumers again may ask some questions in some day, but particularly the long-term policies must be clear. The message to the investor must be clear. Thank you very much for your recommendations. I have taken down notes of all of them. The time is already over. I mean, we have already a delay of 10 minutes. So in this respect, we cannot take many questions. But still, we would like to get just one or two and finish the session. Any question? Can you introduce yourself first? And to whom you are asking your question, can you please name the panelist also?
Teşekkür ederim.
Thank you. I have a question to Ibrahim. I'm from Nortel Energy Company. Nordex 3.2 megawatts turbine. This is actually a gear-based system, but why did you pick that type of a turbine? And another question about Nordex. Can you just explain how many years did you spend to reach that level in Turkey?
Biraz duyamadım tam. Dişli kutu sistemini dediniz değil mi?
Evet, dişlili sistem. Yani gearbox kullanıyor.
Evet.
I think you asked a question about gear system, gearbox. Why did you pick gearbox system? And how much time did you spend until you reach and end up the 3.2 turbine? As Nordex, In 1985, this company was established in Denmark, and the first one was developed in 1985. Then it was further developed, and then we continued with 1, 1.3, 1.5, 2.5. We continued this way. And they are all gearbox. As Nordex companies, starting from the very beginning to the end, we all preferred gearbox. For the direct drive, we had a design for offshore. And strategically, offshore part is not being implemented by the company. This branch is closed. So we have only gearbox system. Especially, those gearbox are manufactured in Germany. And then they were mounted to the turbines and sent to Turkey. As direct drive, mainly Enercon is using it very frequently, and some other producers are trying this direct drive technology. Actually, there is a production loss, a little, because in the gearbox, because they have a contact. But in the direct drive, there is the rotor has a direct contact with the generator. The loss is less. So it's a little bit advantageous. But the torque of the rotor and the torque of the generator, again, there is a function of a gearbox. And also the power coming from the rotor come to the nacelle and the tower. They need to be distributed, you know. So actually there's a need for a gearbox then. And the gearbox technology or the direct drive, actually, the companies have their own strategies, and this is just a decision of the company from the beginning. And the nominal output of the when it is more, then the direct drive is advantageous. But of course, there's a need for a converter in the direct drive. There is a need for a translator of the torque, actually. And well, I cannot say that which one is superior than the other, because there are many different technical arguments and there is no need to get into the technical details. But as the Nordex company, starting from 1985, we are using gearbox systems. And we have even 3.3 megawatt systems still with gearbox. The microphone is not working.
Aynen. Tamam. Teşekkürler.
Evet, biz de teşekkür ediyoruz.
Thank you very much for the question. I want to make an additional comment. As Eurosolar, this is actually the European Renewable Energy Agency, and this is the Turkey branch of that agency. It's just like an association. And as Eurosolar Turkey, we will make the sixth one, a sixth conference. 100% renewable energy is possible, because actually only it's possible to have the solution for our country with 100% localization, and the subject is the community-based energy generation. You are all invited to our congress.
Tamam, size de geleceğiz.
Teşekkür ederim. Elektromekanik Sanayiciler Derneği Genel
I'm Secretary General of the Electromechanic Industrialists Association, Secretary General. I'm thankful for the organization of this Congress first. When I looked at the program, I found something very interesting, and there is nobody invited from the Ministry of Industry. All the speakers are from the renewable energy, equipment, localization, and etc. They have recommendations, okay, here, but I don't see any industrialist in the hall. This should be taken into consideration. We have actually studies on this subject, and I can let you know it later. And I have another contribution. In the components, if we would like to increase localization, while we are providing the licenses, we should increase actually the percentages every year. The defense industry did this, and we need to do it in this sector also. Then we can have the local industry improved. Thank you.
Bu tarafta bir katılımcımız var. Evet.
I would like to thank for this panel first about those licensing periods, investment periods, sorry. Everybody just focused on the delays, but still we will have some more problems. There is the pre-licensing period, which is 2 years long. But also I would like to underline something else. As Ramazan also said, maybe Ramazan, you can answer my question, because it is under the responsibility of your general directorate. In April, there were applications, and right now we are in November. We don't have any result yet. I think maybe there will be the competition almost in the April of next year. The pre-licensing is 2 years, licensing 3 years, and it's actually a total makes 6 years. And related to those, which general directorate, which minister, which agency, it doesn't matter what you do, what values you put, the realization is very low. But of course, we should start somewhere. I mean, so you are representing a general directorate, especially the technical aspects of the applications, I think should be evaluated by your general directorate. So especially, I'm not criticizing any other colleagues. I don't want to offend anybody. But actually, before the tender, there is a need for some regulations, arrangements. Why actually you do not evaluate all the applications from the beginning to the end in terms of technical evaluation? Because you are looking at it, and you are the General Directorate of Renewable Energy. If you're included in it, then this 1 year period can be completed in 3 months, 4 months. I mean, he's talking about the evaluation of the applications. Because if you complete, I mean, the evaluation in just a couple of months, then this period is shortened. You know, they lose time during this period. So I have such a recommendation. We have a deputy in the hall also, and colleagues, please, while you are making amendments to the legislation, think about that, because we have lost some time. Even a year has passed since the applications taken in April. As also Mehmet said, when you go to province A, it's different. I mean, when you go to province B, it's different. When you go to the same city even, where is your construction permit? And in province B, they are not asking your construction permit, etc. There's a need for standardization in the rules and principles. The organization of this should be under your responsibility. Therefore, this is my wish from you, my request from you. Everybody can contribute how to do it, and we can also provide our feedback and comments, but just please think about this and the pre-licensing period. I mean, I'm sorry, he's talking about application until pre-licensing period. Please work on this, because you are all included in it. You are doing the majority of the work, so related to the financial parts, I'm sure you can also correct and you can also evaluate it. You have a really very qualified personnel. So then this is my recommendation. Thank you. Thank you very much. About the legislation, you know, there are legislative arrangements, and also there are the regulations just for the implementation of the laws and legislation. So in this respect,
verilmiş görevler, yetkiler
the tasks are given by the law can only be undertaken by the institutions mentioned in the law. Of course, you are right in some aspects, but it's not that much easy, especially in terms of improvement of the legislation. We are still discussing and working, but the law needs to pass from the parliament if you are going to amend it. And finally, it must pass to the plenary. And I think in the future, this subject will be on the agenda. We are aware of those actually recommendations. Thank you.
süremizi yaklaşık 20 dakika aşmış
We have a delay of 20 minutes already. Last question, and after that we finish. Good afternoon. I am coming from İzmir, Mazhar Zorlu Holding, energy consultant. I have a study about the small turbines in Urla Technopark. For 4 years I worked there. But there was no design rules. There were no design rules. And then in 2011 we had. Then there was no actually test rules. Then we had it. But unfortunately, this process was not standardized yet by the Turkish Standards Institute. And when we are talking about 1 megawatt or 2.5 megawatts, the licensed ones are large ones. But when we are talking about 1 kilowatt, 2 kilowatt, small ones, just to get benefit from those, their procedure of acceptance, preparation of the project, and etc. are the same. I mean, the applicant should prepare the same documents if he is going to have a very large-scale project or a very little or small-scale one. This is not fair. Just I want to say it. And I think you can actually have a facilitation for the small-scale ones. Thank you.
Evet, biz de Kasım Bey'e teşekkür
Thank you very much for the contribution.
Bilmiyorum, son söz olarak
I said that it was the last question, but here we have the head of the committee in the hall. Maybe we can take the last words from him. Thank you very much. We have really important colleagues in this hall. We are all together, and especially we had problems. And still we have some problems. I realized it from the questions, especially in the preparation of the file. Yes, I agree, it's not fair. I mean, the documents should be simplified for the small-scale projects. I also believe this. Because the ones then the people who want to deal with it, they can do it easily. And I hope the legislation will be brought before the parliament again by this new government, and just for the correction of the or improvement of the infrastructure. We are aware of those problems and gaps, and in the shortest extent possible, we will improve it. And the laws, regulations, arrangements will make the actual fields more efficient. We are decisive. This is my last words. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Okay, now this is the end of this session. I would like to thank to the organizers of this Congress. I would like to thank to the panelists, namely Giles Dixon, Murat Onuk, Ibrahim Özaslan, and Mehmet Acarla. Thank you. As a conclusion, in Turkey, wind energy can be localized. Turkish industry can be developed. Everything is ready. So the studies are going on. We hope that in the following couple of years, we will have amendments in the legislation. We will have localization, and we will have improvements. as it is supposed to be. Thank you.